Following on from one of our most successful videos on how to construct a metal stud partition, a number of enquiries have come in the fact that how do we form an external corner and how would we build a door opening? And that's what I'm going to demonstrate today. To build a partition, we're going to need a U-track and a C-stud. These are available in various lengths and widths. So I've marked on the floor where my U-track needs to fit. I now need to set where the door opening is actually going to be. The opening itself, it's worth double checking on the door lining that is going to be fitted, the size, before you transfer that onto your lines on the floor. So this is where my door opening is actually going to be. You can now cut the U-track and we'll then fix this to the floor. You can now see how it's going to form the external corner. There are a couple of things that we need to do. Our plasterboard has got to slide through, so we can either leave a 15mm gap for a 12.5mm board, so our plasterboard will slide through with ease, or we can take it off the inside leg and leave the outside one in place. That acts as a nice stop for when our plasterboard runs through. We're now ready to fix our U-track to the floor using the Siniat 13mm wafer head screw. At the door opening, we need 2 wafer head screws. And 150mm back, 2 more. On domestic housing, the 2 screws at the door opening are all that is required. By putting the 2 screws 150mm back, that will allow for heavier weights indoors, up to 75 kilograms. I'm now going to do the same on the other side of the door opening. I've now fixed my head track. You will notice that it's continuous. It doesn't have an opening. I now need to fix my plasterboard before I can form the external corner. If you notice, I have forgotten to leave the 15mm gap for the 12.5mm plasterboard, so it won't slide through. Not to worry, we can actually cut that in situ and fold the tab in. So if you do make a mistake and you forget to leave the gap, you can cut it in situ. Now I've corrected that, I can slide my board through and I can now fit. That is my board now fixed. Now cut my C-stud to length. I can place this in position. With my stud now in position, forming part of the external corner, I now need to secure at 600 centres. So that's my C-stud firmly fixed to form the external corner. That's all my C-studs now cut and in position. This C-stud is going to form part of the door opening. We need the addition of timber to take the door lining. Now the timber can either sit inside the C-stud or on the face of the C-stud. I'm going to demonstrate both methods. I now have my timber, which is ready to fix inside of my C-stud. The C-stud's not been securely fixed into position yet until my timber's in place. The reason for that is, as you can see, this will slide into the C-stud. Sometimes it won't, and an alternative method would be to take out the stud and slide into place. I now need to secure the timber in place using a Siniat high thread screw at 600 centres. I'm now going to secure my C-stud in position using a 13mm wafer head screw. I'm now going to plumb and fix the stud at the head. With my stud now plumb, I can secure. I'm now going to show you the alternative method. I'm now going to put the timber on the face of the stud. To do this, we place our timber against the stud, and the timber should also be sat inside the track. We're now going to secure the timber in place using the high thread screw at 600 centres. So my timber's nice and flush. I can now secure the stud in place. And now plumb. Now that I'm plumb, I'm now going to fix the stud at the head. So, with my two door opening studs securely fixed, I can now form the door head. To form the door head, we use a piece of U-track. The first thing we do is we must cut a leg of not less than 150 millimeters. It can be more, but never less. We then need to add on the door opening. What we want to do is just double check before we cut. Then we need a further 150 millimeters. With those cut, all we simply do is fold down the edges. We can now fix the head at the correct height. We do that, we need to check the door lining. With the leg in position and at the correct height, I can now secure by using two wafer head screws. Then we repeat this on the opposite side. I can now set the opposite side. That's my final stud in place. That maintains my stud centres at 600 millimeters for 1200 wide board and 450 if it's a 900 wide board. To create a different type of opening, such as a serving hatch, there are a couple of differences. We still have our uprights, we have our head track, but you'll notice At the bottom, our floor track is continuous all the way through. And we also have another piece of U-track, and this is flipped in the opposite direction and will be fixed at the height to form our rectangular opening. By doing this, we can continue our studs at 600 centres for 1200mm plasterboards and 450 centres for 900mm plasterboards. I've fixed my internal board. I'm now going to put my plasterboard on the outside of the partition, reinforcing our external corner. Top tip, it will pay to draw a centre line at 600. This way you know where your stud is behind. Where the stud is, the centre of the stud is for the door lining, I've also marked. Again, I can then put my screws in at the 300 centres. I know where the stud is. So I can now place my end stud. What I need to do is line up the centre line of the stud with the edge of the board. This is so we can continue with our next board. It may seem wasteful, but we can now cut the head and we can use the edge of the door liner to remove this board. The reason for that is we reduce the risk of cracking by taking the board into the opening as opposed to running up the side of the door edge. I can now use my cutting knife to run down the back of the board. So we've cut, we can now snap. And remove. So as you can see, we've now started to form the door opening. Boarding finished, we're now ready to install the door lining. It's important to keep the lining flush with the edge of the plasterboard. With it positioned correctly, we can now fix. So, we've shown you how to form an external corner. We've also shown you how to form a door opening. Happy building.